So I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I would like to say good morning to everyone. I'm Adele Imrie. Normally, Tim Murphy, who chairs the TCHC board, would provide these opening remarks. However, Tim is unable to attend this morning's meeting, and in his absence, the board has asked me to serve as chair for today's meeting. So I would like to welcome you to our board meeting, and we are holding this through WebEx and live streaming on YouTube. I would like to apologize for the delay as our in-camera meeting went overtime, and I appreciate your patience with that. I would like to begin with an acknowledgement that the land we are all on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I would also like to share an acknowledgement of our community members of African descent. Today, we acknowledge all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. February is Black History Month. The 2023 theme for Black History Month is Ours to Tell. This theme represents both an opportunity to engage in open dialogue and a commitment to learning more about the stories Black communities in Canada have to tell about their histories, successes, sacrifices, and triumphs. TCHC celebrated Black History Month with a number of events this month, as has the City of Toronto. And later in the morning, I am pleased to say that we will be hearing a story that comes from our very own community. So we're looking forward to that. As this year's theme underlines, TCHC's CABR strategy is underpinned by the need for dialogue and learning. And I hope that this month has helped to set the stage for a successful year in pursuit of that strategy. In today's meeting, we will be discussing the next step in Swansea Mews. TCHC is requesting board approval to submit a demolition permit application to the City of Toronto. I recognize the traumatic impact that this incident has had on the residents of Swansea Mews, and that this new development may contribute to more stress and concern. In requesting this approval, TCHC is doing their best to put the safety of tenants first, and any plans for demolition would include a plan to replace these units as soon as possible. Swansea Mews households will continue to receive information so that they are aware any meaningful developments in this process. This board appreciates the continued participation of Swansea Mews households, and we are grateful for your strength throughout what has no doubt been an incredibly challenging year. I would like to highlight some important news. The City of Toronto passed the 2023 budget earlier this year, solidifying TCHC's budget for this year. The finance and strategic planning teams worked incredibly hard on this year's budget, striking a delicate balance for this year. We're grateful for their skill and incredibly hard work. Moving on, I have the sad duty of acknowledging the passing of the Honourable David C. Onley, former Lieutenant Governor of Ontario, on January the 14th, 2023. As Ontario's first Lieutenant Governor with a physical disability, Mr. Onley adopted accessibility as the overarching theme of his mandate. He defined accessibility as that which enables people to achieve their full potential, believing that true accessibility occurs when disabled people can fully participate in the social, cultural, and economic life of Ontario. It was just last December that Mr. Onley met with TCHC's Kathy Birch, chair of the Our Path Committee. On December the 6th, Kathy received the David C. Onley Award for Leadership in Accessibility, an award that commemorates Mr. Onley's legacy by recognizing Ontarians who have gone above and beyond to improve accessibility for people with disabilities. And I think we can all acknowledge that Kathy Birch has done that with incredible passion and skill. And at this time, I would like to congratulate Kathy on this prestigious award. And I would like to invite Kathy to address the board and share her thoughts.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Good morning. Yes, we can. And welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for the acknowledgement. I'd like to say that the RPATH Committee and TCHC would like to take the moment to honor Lieutenant Governor David Onley, who passed away in January. His life work of advocating for people with disabilities was extremely important to him. When Mr. Onley was young, he had polio that left him with health challenges. Early in his career at City TV, he ensured his disability was not hidden behind a desk, and that his career path expanded and he went on to become lieutenant governor, he made more people aware of challenges for people with disabilities. He mentored by example. In 2014. He created the David C. Onley Award for Leadership and Accessibility from the province of Ontario. Mr. Onley had an impact on the way our path addresses issues by ensuring accessibility is addressed honestly, transparently, and without discrimination against people with disabilities. Our path started in May of 2013, and in June of 2014, our path participated in the People in Motion show, where it showcased the work that we were doing with TCHC. Mr. Onley was a special guest speaker that year at the conference, and he made a special effort to meet with us and the then CEO of TCHC, Greg Spurn. In those conversations, Mr. Onley praised TCHC for the use of the expertise of people with lived experience to help the corporation make good decisions about accessibility and what's needed for people to live better quality of life in their units and in their communities. In December 2022, I was honored to receive the David C. Onley Award for Leadership and Accessibility from the current Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Dowdeswell and Mr. Onley himself. We will honor him by continuing to educate people about true needs of people with disabilities and to improve the quality and the quantity of accessible homes and communities in Toronto community housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And again, I'd like to say congratulations. It's an incredibly well-deserved award. And thank you for all you do for TCHC and people with disabilities in general. We really appreciate everything you do.
Thank you very much.
Chair, could we not have a formal motion of congratulations to Kathy for this very prestigious award? I'd just like to move that because it would be in the minutes at that point as a congratulation. We don't have many tenants getting such prestigious awards, and I think we should congratulate Kathy Birch for her David C. Onley Leadership Award and make that a formal motion.
I will certainly second that. And could I ask for a vote? All in favor? That's unanimous, Kathy. And congratulations. It's incredibly well-deserved.
Thank you.
So we will we'll move on. And I'd like to turn our attention to another great Ontarian now, someone who is very close to us. Debbie Douglas. Debbie is the.
Is this a surprise?
I was very excited about that. Debbie is the Executive Director of the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants. Through her work in the NGO sector, and particularly at the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, Debbie has highlighted issues of equity and inclusion, including race, gender, and sexual orientation within the immigration system, and promoted the creation of safe, welcoming spaces within the settlement and integration sector. Debbie's work in communities all across Canada has earned her national recognition and honors this month as she received another honor It's the Legacy poster collection was created by Canadian artist Robert Small in 1995 and has since spread around the world to reach millions, celebrating historic African Canadians and Africans. Published during Black History Month every year, this year, Debbie is one of 4 Canadians being celebrated for their Black excellence. We are very proud and fortunate to have such an accomplished leader as part of our board. And I'm very proud to work with you, Debbie. And I would like to congratulate you on this significant honor and ask if you'd like to say a few words to the board.
Thank you. Thank you. What a wonderful surprise. I truly appreciate the kind words. It's always flattering to be recognized for the work. I'm glad that I've been able to contribute. Hope continue to have impact here in Toronto, but certainly across the country. I think I am blessed to sit on a board where my colleagues are committed to ensuring equity for our tenants, but also working towards building a more inclusive city and province. So thank you. Thank you for this recognition. I appreciate it.
It's incredibly important work. There's lots of applause. So thank you very much, Debbie, and certainly the recognition is very well deserved.
Thank you, Adele. I appreciate it.
So we'll move on to our public session. And today we will receive an update from the director of the Center for Advancing the Interests of Black People, discussing the next steps for TCHC's response to Swansea Mews and receiving reports from our board committee chairs. So that concludes my opening remarks. I know that Paula would like to speak to deputations, which we do have a couple today. And so I'm going
That's
to
a point of order,
turn it over
Madam.
to Paula.
This is just a point of orders, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify something about deputations. And I think everybody on this board and in the community knows I've been a very strong advocate to ensure that tenants have an ability to appear before the board and speak at the board for their allotted time. And we've gone through many machinations of how and what that should happen, but we have had the same regimen for many years. I do think it's a very important vehicle to give advice to the board. I'm very sorry if any deputant felt slighted in my request that you, as chair, keep the deputations focused on the item at hand. So I really appreciate advice to the board, but I also feel we need to stay on track and would ask Chair that we just do that. Time is precious, and that's the advice that we need on different items in front of our board. But thank you so much for allowing my point of order.
So I appreciate that, Paula, and certainly the board's practice has always been that the deputant has to speak to a specific item that is on the agenda and only that item. So we will continue with that process. So could I ask if there are any additions or deletions or changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, could I ask if any member of the board has a conflict of interest as it relates to any item on today's agenda? Okay, so items number 6 is being held as it is a presentation, and we do have a deputant on item number 6 as well as on 10A. So those items have been pulled. Could I ask if any member of the board has any other items that they would like to be pulled for further discussion? John?
Yes, I think it would be good for the board to hear from the new Commissioner of Housing Equity, so I'd like to hold 11A.
11A, okay.
Are we going to, sorry, Chair, are we going to hear about Swansea Mews? Just get that update, verbal update anyway.
Oh, that's item 7. Yes.
It's happening.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
I'm sorry. So item 7 as well. Sorry. Okay. So hearing no other items that any members would like to have pulled from the agenda for further discussion, could I ask for a motion to approve the remaining items on the agenda? John, Paula seconder, all in favor? Thank you. So the items have been approved, other than the ones that have been pulled, and I will move to the first of those, which is item number 6. And we do have a deputant on this item. Dara, I'll turn it to you.
Mr. Avila Velarde is in the meeting. Mr. Avila, if you can turn your camera on and unmute yourself, you can begin your deputation when you're ready. You have 5 minutes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes,
All
we
right.
can.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Black History Month. I'm here to speak on item number 6. And for the record, I have spoken on the matter on the agenda since the year 2011. So I hear Councillor Paula Fletcher comments. I will take it as an apology to the last meeting. I love the new land acknowledgement that we read in Regent Park. The last paragraph is very meaningful for us. We remember those who were brought to this country against their wishes as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Confronting anti-Black racism is one of the top priorities of the social development plan for Regent Park. We have an incident and in 2020 when a noose was found hanging from one of the Daniels Corporation's buildings and the constructions. From that moment, our community has been working really hard to address issues of anti-Black racism. The goal of the Employment Economic Development Committee of the SDP is to increase employment rates and entrepreneurial opportunities for residents of Regent Park, considered among the lowest income neighborhoods in Toronto. Until evidence suggests that many Regent Park households are struggling with employment barriers related to language, lack of skills, lack of accreditation, mental health, Islamophobia, systemic racism, and more. This past Tuesday, we have a very special guest to our economic table, Mr. Thomas Barry, to give us a presentation on the Center for Advancing the Interests of Black People. The question from Regent Park residents on the Zoom chat was, how can TCHC confront anti-Black racism in 2023? The answer is simple: jobs, good paying jobs. Mr. Thomas shared with us his experience when he was manager in different areas of the city, hiring talented and skilled TCHC tenants to work. And that is good. It was a good experience for many of residents living in TCHC to become one day approved vendors for the corporation. However, we had challenges, and as a community, we're working diligently to achieve those goals within the Community Benefits Oversight Working Group, known as CBOC, as we develop the next phase of job creation, home ownership, rent to own, etc., for phases 4 and 5 of Regent Park. However, all initiatives created by the city lack proper follow-up, especially at City Hall. And many people in this call remember what happened at the last budget meeting, where a Black woman made requests for accommodation and she was denied. And as such, the council was recessed to allow a person to leave the city hall chambers. That's shameful the way they treat our Black people, by the way. Sadly, last week, I had opportunity to discuss with John Tory at the executive committee of January, and I asked him 2 questions to John Tory. Can we change the shareholders' direction to allow more representation of resident directors at the TCHC board? Currently, we only have 3. It has been the longest standing request since the year 2011. We also asked if residents can be paid honorarium or a stipend for the good work they do for our communities. This past Tuesday, I had the opportunity to talk to 40 new recruits of the Toronto Police who came to 220 Oak Street to teach them about what is to live in poverty, what is to live in a social housing building, what are the problems and challenges of the community. And overall, it was a very positive experience. However, I would suggest, if it's possible, that in the future, residents are paid for this type of contributions they make to enhance and make our communities more thriving. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I'm glad that I was on topic. Thank you.
I don't really think you were.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Are there any comments from any board members?
Thank
Debbie?
you. Thank you, Adele. Thank you very much for your remarks. I wholeheartedly agree. I think we all know that economic justice is part and parcel of our move around dealing with issues of racism, and particularly anti-Indigenous and anti-Black racism. So thanks for making those links.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. I am going to move to the presentation. So the director, I'm trying to see all the squares. The CAPER director.
Barry is Barry Thomas, who's the interim director of the center, is part of the meeting. Barry, if you can turn on your camera and unmute.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't see his square though.
He's up.
Okay. Oh, there he is. Thank you. I think you're on mute, sir.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for receiving the report. You should have in your package a report entitled The Center for the Advancement of the Interests of Black People. 2022 divisional highlights is really what I should say, not 2023. So on that note, the purpose of this report is to provide the Board of Directors with an update the following areas from the center. One, core functions and service deliveries. Two, achievements for the center and the action plan for 2022. And three, key challenges. In summary, in 2022, the Toronto Community Housing Corporation established the CABER strategy team to develop a company-wide confronting anti-Black racism strategy. The strategy aims to identify systemic barriers, provide recommendations to address anti-Black racism issues embedded in the TCHC policies, programs, and service delivery, while creating a diverse, inclusive, and equitable environment for Black tenants and staff. Anti-Black racism, ABR as it's known, is defined as the policies and practices rooted in Canadian institutions that reflect and reinforce beliefs, attitudes, prejudice, stereotypes, and/or discrimination directed at people who identify as Black and are part of the African diaspora. In this context, it is how Blackness impacts the experience of Black tenants and staff living and working in TCHC communities. This is as an employer and as a social housing provider. Should be aware that our recent tenant survey indicated that we are talking about 40% of our client base being Black. The report is an 8-point plan created through the CABER strategy team, was approved by the Board of Directors on February 26, 2021. Upon the approval of report, an action plan in accordance with the 8-point plan was collaboratively created with all divisions of TCHC to identify gaps in the service delivery model and institutional policies in relation to Black staff and tenants. The center was then established to lead the organization in implementing the CABER strategy in action. The center officially launched on December 2nd, 2021. The recommendations, it's recommended that the board receive this report for information. The reasons for the recommendations: for 2022, the center focused its efforts on the following areas: advancing the implementation of the organization's CABER strategy to drive institutional change. 2, to collaborate with TCHC divisions to embed an ABR lens in the organization policies, procedures, and program. And 3, improving the Black tenant and staff experience. We also had to hire all our staff during that same period. The effort of the center in these areas has been guided by TCH's key strategic priorities, particularly the following. Goal 1, support the rights of every tenant to have a reasonable enjoyment of their homes. Goal 2, build high-performing teams that bring life to a culture of tenant service. Goal 3, empower and support frontline leadership and employees in resolving the issues and challenges locally in support of tenant needs. And Goal 5, transform the way we work through the implementation of effective and efficient tenant services, processes, systems, and tools. The strategic direction of the center is guided by the CABR strategy 8-point plan. These strategies are 1, decent and fair housing. 2, meaningful economic investment. 3, healthy children, youth, and families. 4, access to culturally responsive health and mental health services. 5, community-centered safety. 6, divesting from police culture. 7, uplifting social support networks. And 8, addressing anti-Black racism and cultural redress. Being guided by the 8-point plan, the outcomes the center aims to achieve include the following. Instituting organizational change by driving innovative responses to ABR and all forms of discrimination. There is a little bit of confusion about why we specifically hanging on to the notion of ABR, and that's exactly why. Building and sustaining strategic relationships among diverse groups by aligning efforts with community partners, policymakers, and other stakeholders across the sector. Impacting service delivery through building organizational capacity to address ABR on an ongoing basis, and influencing the sector through multidisciplinary research, analysis, and strategic narrative. In relation to the CABR plan, the center has realized a number of achievements in 2022. 1, addressing anti-Black racism and cultural redress. We leverage the performance management team to promote and assess staff ABR competencies. We applied the CABR lens to HR and finance policies and reviewed 8 HR policies and procedures. 2, under the area of meaningful economic development and uplifting social networks, we increased economic opportunities for tenants through revised process callouts for intern managers and continued callouts across TCHC. We supported the Black Tree Community Health in the development of a Black Business Essentials workshop and connected Black tenants to free entrepreneurship training. We hosted TCHC Confronting Anti-Black Racism Partnership Forum to build networks and community relations that can aid in addressing ABR. We hosted TCHC Black History Month to honor Black tenant contributions to TCHC communities, and hosted and contributed and funded the Black Youth Gala, which provided academic scholarships to thriving Black youth. Number 3, community-centered safety and access to cultural responsive health and mental health services. We reviewed TCHC's crisis response procedures and workflow through an ABR lens and created a crisis response toolkit to improve communications and crisis response practices following a critical incident. We provided coaching support for a youth in policing workshop with the City of Toronto. We created an ABR toolkit for the CSU to create proactive responses to ABR and prepare youth on how to engage with police. We supported the CSU in the development of a strategic plan to complete the cadet pilot program and applied a CABR lens to health and safety activities. Number 4, employment training and development in ABR. We conducted learning and needs assessment with TCHC staff, developed and facilitated pilot sessions for content development, completed 654 hours of training for 164 staff in ABR from Q3 and 4, and supported the transition of Toronto's seniors housing through ABR toolkits. And number 5, community engagement. Last year, we invested 40,000 in 8 community projects through the center funds. 433 tenants were engaged on a needs basis and strengthened the TCHC communities in relation to the KBR strategy across the regions. The challenges we found, the center continues to make progress towards instituting organizational change and impacting the service delivery for Black tenants and staff. However, the following challenges and areas for support have been identified. There have been challenges with scaling ABR workshops and training sessions across TCHC. This is mainly due to the pandemic, due to the impact of COVID and other corporate challenges. The center has been delayed in timelines for the KBR action plan and targets, and there have been challenges in relation to institutional readiness and discomfort related to ABR. And last but by no means least, we will be hosting, and once you've accepted our report, we will be hosting our annual report to the community on March 21st, the International Day for the Elimination of Racism, and bring this report to the communities. This is my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to say it's very nice to meet you. And I appreciate you speaking to the board. Are there any questions for Mr. Thomas? Debbie, then John.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, and congratulations on your new role. Thanks for the report. I think I speak for me, but I think for the whole board. We were all wondering what was happening at CABR and it's been a while since we had a sense of the activities. I did want to point out we need to be careful around language. So I get what you mean, but when you talk about collaborating with divisions to embed ABR, I don't think that's what you mean. We're not trying to embed anti-Black racism into our divisions. So I think we have to continue to use the language of confronting or addressing ABR, or else we're basically saying we are embedding anti-racism against Black people, which is not, I'm sure, not what you mean. It would be, it's good to see some of the results. I'm wondering though, and probably if you had presented with the slides, I could have grabbed it. I don't have a sense
Debbie,
of,
would you like someone to put up the presentation?
No, because I don't have a sense, for example, of how many people are on staff. What are the role? What are their roles? How is it that you give us a sense of a number of activities you've done across the organization? I don't have the larger sense of what's the mission of the institute and how does it fit within TCHC, right? You talk about a broad mission around making systems change within TCHC. Well, does the institute, for example, is the institute able to direct HR? So those kinds of questions, and not for you to answer now necessarily, but certainly in your next update. I would appreciate just having a clearer sense in terms of who is at the institute, what are you doing in addition to some of these outputs and outcomes that you shared with us here today, but just to get a better sense of the institute and where it fits in within TCHC. And thanks for the challenges, but also more concretely, what challenges are you finding in trying to move the needle in terms of hiring? Is that part of your role?
Yes, that is part of my role, and thank you. And apologies for the bad language. We stand corrected, and we'll make sure that doesn't happen again. We have a staff currently of 13 people, which is comprised of myself as the center director, we have a human rights and diversity specialist, a communications coordinator, a manager who manages and assists me in some way, but also manages the policy work. So we're doing a lot of policy review and policy discussions with that. We have a resolutions coordinator who has, over the last year, piloted a kind of complaints program that I'm heavily reviewing right now. We took in about over 100 complaints, but we're looking at the resolution and really where our mission and our mandate comes into play, and just how far our mandate goes in relation to all the other policies. That's a very challenging piece of work that we're doing now, and I'll be happy to share that with the board as soon as I wrap my own head around it. As I don't know if people are aware, I just started in November, and so I'm still in the process of reading. But we also have the area that we are doing and having significant inroads on, and that is one of the areas, just I mentioned in my report, having some difficulty getting trainers and that kind of stuff during the pandemic and doing online. We are projecting to do about 4,000 to possibly 6,000 hours of training this year. Our all the senior staff has been trained, and that just completed this week. So now we're going from, I guess you could say, ABR 101 to ABR 202, and really beginning to ferret out the workplace scenarios that will create the best teachable moments for our staff as we go through that. And so let me just stop there, because I can go on, but I will.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the resolution piece, I think, for me, is the crux of us, the board, trying to understand the role of the institute vis-a-vis the organization. So maybe
Yes.
Jack and Dara can comment. And this comes up for me because I guess all of our emails are public to tenants. So I get lots of emails from tenants saying, this and this happened. I complained to this people who are supposed to be looking out for Black people. And so I'm not sure if people have the right information and if they're following the right processes.
Yes.
So just to get a sense, right? Because I think there's some confusion there within the tenants as well.
No, and just to touch on another part of your question, Debbie, is about in relation to how do we work with HR and how do we work with other parts of the organization. Overall, the experience has been positive, but challenging, because we are confronting long-held stereotypes and attitudes and behaviors, and it's not going to be an overnight change, but my experience has been overwhelmingly positive. I just want to point to two other things that happened in the last couple of days that in my experience, there's been reading, and so I've been sort of overtaken by the weight of the reading and the weight of the job. But we did a Blackness and Policy in Planning and Policy workshop that was supported by development and participated in by our CEO and by the director CDO Jessica House, and had a very fulsome, enlightening, educating discussion that sort of got my head out of the mountain of thought that I've been in for the last couple of months. The other one is that we had an amazing Black Staff Caucus event yesterday that was headlined by Selena Cesar Chavanez and Tandiwe Fadane. Tandiwe is the South African High Commissioner, and you'll know that Selena was a member of Parliament recently. And what these two events have shown me is that we have gotten to the point as an organization where the conversation, uncomfortable as it may be, is beginning to bite, and we are getting to a level of comfort. So for me, that's the first step in the right direction, and I'm encouraged by that. As I said, my next step is to come out with a little bit harder hitting public facts on the 21st, but also of March, create a benchmark so that when we come back in March 2024, we have very clear benchmarks that we will be striving towards and be able to measure it. I'm also very keen and clear that we need to have some level of engagement with the board. Sooner the better. I've spoken to Dara about it, and Jag is supporting us in that. And I'm looking forward to that because we need to understand if our tenant base is 40% Black, what are we doing from a business case to ensure that the customer service to those tenants are embedded in anti-Black and Black racism, and it's confronted, and that we are delivering customer service, not just to our Black tenants, but to all our tenants in a much more equitable way. And to sum up, you know, one of the adages that I've learned in this job, you know, the Bible says, treat everyone as you'd like to be treated. The reality is in this job, I think the Bible might be off a bit, is because we need to treat people the way they want to be treated. And that's how I understand the difference between equality and equity and the Bible.
Thank you. John, I think you had comments.
Just a question, yes, and please, very briefly, Barry, I recognize. Thank you for the presentation. I recognize that you've just begun. Were you involved in the training of staff? It mentioned 654 hours. Were you present for that, or did that precede you?
That has preceded me, but I was also one of the original staff members who talked and advocated for the center to be. So I had some involvement in the development of the training, and I've managed to sit in on a couple of the training sessions to date. I haven't been able to.
That's good. Sorry, in the interest of time, I just want to keep it.
Yeah.
We've got a lot on the agenda, and I want to get to my other questions. In regard to the staff assessments or the needs assessment of 30 staff across the TCHC divisions, can you tell me again, as briefly as you can, roughly what you found and what you learned from that?
Sorry, I missed the back part of the question.
Sure. So it mentions that conducted learning needs assessments with 30 staff across 4 TCHC divisions. And I'm just wondering if you can tell us, you know, briefly what was found in those needs assessments.
Let me get back to you on that because I wasn't involved in that in detail, but I will get the details to you, John.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And good job, by the way, in presenting this, having just been thrown into the job.
Yeah.
Not easy, right?
Thank you.
Chair Emery, I believe you're on mute.
Sorry, Uba. Thanks, Jag.
Thanks, Adele. Great work, Barry. And just quick question, and does the center looks after individual concerns and complaints and what have you, or is it a systemic change, like, or a little bit of both?
It has, but thanks for the question. Yes, it has to be both because one sort of informs the other. We will continue to do take-in complaints, and we will use those complaints in the training as we are going forward, because what is clear, we've done a significant job in terms of explaining what anti-Black racism is, going through the nomenclature that is new. But for our staff, it is not as simple and as that, because our staff are from all parts of the world, like the demographic of the city. And so we need to get actual complaints, sanitize them, and use them as teachable moments for staff in the training and in the practice at work. So we will continue to do the complaints, assess the complaints, but it's also from a staff perspective and from a leader's perspective in the organization, that we're collating all the information that guides us through this work. Also, the expertise that are out there will be a constant part of our work. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Very good presentation, and I really appreciate a lot of the numbers that are in there to really get an understanding of where we're at today and as we go forward, the progress. One of the challenges of TCHC is just the sheer scale and size of the people, number of people we house and so on. The two numbers sort of jumped out at me and then the size of the staff. The 164 staff that were trained, as well as I believe it was 433 tenants that were engaged. Are there any challenges that you foresee that the board should be thinking about in terms of the ability to scale the program and scale this initiative over the next couple of years? It's going to be a lot of work, obviously, getting sort of widespread throughout all of our communities, but anything from a board perspective we should be cognizant of from any challenges around the ability to scale the impact of the center?
Let me answer it this way, Nick. It's on one level, we have this model where we thought and theorized that this is the kind of staffing that we need in the center to address the numbers that we need to address. The other part of it is that the center staff is also a collaboration with other departments in TCHC. So not all the money is directly flowed into the organization. In some cases, we think, and we are thinking through this and talking through this deeply with our staff and with all our other key stakeholders, is that to scale up to those numbers, we need to train more staff other than through just the training mechanism. So one of the options could be that for tenant service coordinators who sees the bulk of the over-the-counter tenants, and for superintendents and so on, and for tenant service community service consultants, maybe seconding them into the center for a year to 18 months to pick up the services and to learn the skills from the more permanent staff in the center, and then send them back to their respective areas and then begin to target different divisions for, okay, we've done some people in facilities management now. We've got some people going in human resources. Maybe we need to focus on the development side and get a person or an ambassador in there. And then also begin to look at a level of certification for staff to be able to understand at what level certain staff are capable of functioning, so that that staff complaint doesn't always come to the center, that it could be handled by somebody who's already been scaled up and trained up in their area and can work in their own area and impact their colleagues. So it's broadening the base on one. The numbers are challenging, I agree, but the other part of it is beginning to look at it from a return on investment or a opportunity cost, or in fact, a loss of potential if we don't do it.
Great, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Thomas? Okay, again, I'd like to say it was very nice to meet you, and congratulations on your new position. And we certainly appreciate the fulsome report, and we look forward to your participation in future board meetings. and receiving your updates. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
So we will move on to item number 7. And
Sorry, Madam
is this-
Chair, if we can just have a motion to receive.
oh, a motion to receive. I'm sorry. Debbie, seconder Nick, thank you. All in favor? Perfect. Sorry, Dara.
Sorry.
So we will move on to item number 6, and I think this is Alan, Nadia, Dara. I'm not sure who's going to take the lead on this, so I'm going to leave it up to you. This is the Swansea Mews update.
Through you, Madam Chair, I can take the lead and do the initial
Perfect, Alan.
information on it. And then obviously, as you mentioned, Jessica Hawes is with us, who is our acting Chief Development Officer, Dara Marr, who's our General Counsel and Corporate Secretary, and they'll help me through with the report. So item 7 on today's agenda, as Chair Imrie alluded to at the beginning of the meeting, is to seek authorization to apply to the City of Toronto for a permit to demolish the buildings located at the TCHC property at Queensway Windermere, also known as Swansea Mews. On May the 27th, due to a defect in the original construction, the underside of a structural concrete panel detached and fell. On June the 12th, 2022, an order to remedy the unsafe condition was issued to TCHC, and we need to comply with that order. Based on all of the professional independent opinions that we've received, the only option that exists to satisfy the order and remedy the unsafe condition is to demolish the buildings, and thus we're requesting approval to proceed with obtaining a demolition permit. We are pleased to answer what questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Alan, Jessica, or Dara?
Just a question: is there any requirement when you're asking for a demolition permit that the city's going to ask for what future plans for the site is? Is that sometimes part of a request for demolition?
Through the chair, I can answer that question if that suits. Yes. What the first step is submitting something that's called a rental housing demolition conversion application. That application includes a housing issues report. Those will be submitted to the city for approval, and it is part of the process when you are looking to demolish rental housing units. Through that process, we will have conversations with the city regarding elements such as replacement of the units and a number of other elements with respect to the process. We are doing things a little bit differently than the city typically would anticipate. Normally, this is part of a rezoning. Given the outcomes of the engineering reports, we know that if we were to wait for a rezoning to be completed before applying for this demolition permit, it could take a number of years. So we will be looking to the city for their advice on that process on how to proceed in the most timely manner.
Is that mainly because of cost of protecting the site while it is vacant?
That is correct.
Are there any other questions? John?
Yes. What is the cost of demolition, and is it covered by any kind of insurance that the corporation has?
Through the chair, I can speak to that. That was included actually as a confidential component of the attachments, just because it's subject to future tendering. But for the insurance piece, I'd look to Dara to answer that question.
Sorry, and through the chair, I can advise that we have submitted a claim through our insurer, advising that we'll be seeking to claim under our insurance policies in relation to some of the costs associated with this incident, including the reconstruction costs. That process is, as you can imagine, one that will take some time and involve a lot of conversations with the insurer and our broker through Housing Services Corporation. We have initiated those conversations and we'll be reporting back to the board on the outcome of that process.
Right, and then will we be, I imagine, and this is for the CEO, I would imagine all along the way we'll be in regular contact with those families that have been directly impacted by this, to tell them that, you know, we're really sorry, the buildings are going to have to come down, it's going to be a long process for clearing the site and rebuilding.
Through the chair, you're absolutely correct, and Ms. Knight's on with us as well, and there's already been a communication that has gone out to tenants. And Paula, would you like to speak further to this?
Yes, through the chair. We actually were proactive last week, understanding that this would be on the board agenda. So we have proactively engaged with tenants through a standard communication. And we've also advised them that we'll be working with them as we move through this process to ensure that they're engaged with throughout. So we did do our best to get ahead of this being a public agenda item today, just recognizing the impact that would have on tenants.
And then in regard to, with all of these tenants moved there, I'm sure that there are some who have moved farther away from their neighborhood than they would have wished. Will we be making ongoing efforts to try to, over the course of time, which it won't be soon, but over the course of time, to help them find residency in closer proximity to where they were living?
So through the chair, I'll actually direct that to my colleague, Jessica Hawes, who's responsible for the relocation team who's working with tenants.
Thanks, Paula. Through the chair, our process of matching and relocating tenants does have tenants offer and accept a replacement unit in lieu of their Swansea unit that has been the building has been, thank you, that is uninhabitable. Through that process, they will remain in that unit. It's not the intention to continue to move them once they have accepted their relocation unit.
Okay, all right. So I was just wondering if, I mean, I was thinking if somebody reluctantly accepted a placement, you know, let's say in, you know, the northeastern part of the city where they'd really rather not be, if they were still looking for assistance from the corporation to get, you know, somewhat closer to where they were living in the West End.
I mean, through the chair, we have, I would say, our efforts to secure units for this relocation process has been somewhat unparalleled to other processes. We've gone to great lengths to select as many and collect as many as possible to offer to tenants. We're happy to share some of that information, perhaps should you want to see more detail about that process.
Okay, all right, thanks for the answers.
Brian, then Paula.
I just wondered what the timing might be for your bringing back what you might see could be on that site and involvement of the tenants in that process.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Director. There's a pretty clear process in terms of next steps associated with looking at future redevelopment of the site. It's subject to the new approvals framework for TCHC revitalizations. That's a City of Toronto process that is involves the Housing Secretary, Curatio, as well as TCHC in determining those outcomes. It's a three-stage process. The first one looks at options. And has associated with it an initial development proposal that will come back to this board as well as to council for approval before proceeding. The timelines on that are somewhat unknown. It's subject to budgets, etc. But we can respond with timelines on that. And Jag, you might want to speak on timelines as well.
Nothing actually, and thank you, Jessica, but I don't think I could add anything further to say that it's unfortunately a little unknown at this point, and we'd be able to bring back further clarity though I'll say in the near future once we begin this process.
Thank you.
Paula?
Thanks, Chair. The timing that for the demolition is set for?
Through the chair, I can answer that if that's okay, Alan. It is subject to city approvals. So we know that the application for the rental housing demolition will require city planning approval and potentially council approval, depending. And then there is the processing of the demolition permit. So we are a number of months, and this is just a first step towards that process. We will also have our internal tendering processes that will be required to select the successful proponent to undertake that work. So I would say we are a number of months away from demolition.
So there's a window there to have
Yes.
a respectful end to Swansea Mews for all the people that love living there without being in there. I
Yes.
think that we want to make sure through the tenant side, and I'm looking at you, Jag, that this goes through, it's not a relocation effort, it's actually the tenants who feel strongly about Swansea Mews, they can't live there anymore and it's going to be different. So how do you get to say goodbye to Swansea Mews? I'm adding that in there as just a piece of this whole plan. It would be unprecedented to be allowed to demolish with no plan in place. So you're asking something that nobody else gets. And therefore, there may be a number of conditions that get applied to this. I want everyone to know that. Developers cannot knock something down without having something to replace it, or else the whole city would just be knocked down. So it is a very strict rule that in all our revitalizations, it's all clear. So I wouldn't want to call this a revitalization because it's standing as an emergency, in which case we will have a conversation and a plan in what will replace it. And I think the framing of this is very important. And I don't yet hear the framing in a way that starts with unprecedented emergency. We're going to look together, as somebody said, what's going to replace it. Here's the requirements now for a replacement. They're different than if just went in. Here's the challenges around money and many other things. And here's the pathway. And here's some of the options. That to me is going to be of public interest, not just interest to those who live there. But I do believe the ability to say goodbye without reoccupying the buildings is something I'm really would like the leadership team to put your eye on that. And I'm also, for this board, I still don't think we have a clear line of sight on the restart program that was initiated in 2008, somewhere back there, or 2012, which was to rehabilitate this, and then what happened and how it fell through the cracks. So I'm not pointing fingers. I just think there was a program that a previous board approved, which was different than revitalization. It was called Restart. And I'm not sure that was a successful program, but that was what Swansea Mews was to be under. And it never got off the ground. And however many years later, 12 years later, 10 years later, we find that the building actually can't stand on its own. So to me, that's a learning moment as far as looking at the state of good repair, the deep state of good repair, how and who everybody just agreeing to something without the due diligence that was required. And I think you hear me say that a lot, fellow board members, that the due diligence requirement of this board is very high. So I don't think everybody knows about that restart program, but I'm letting you know, this didn't come out of the blue. There's a long breadcrumb trail to where this place was basically condemned by the city. And now we're being told to take it down. So
Understanding with the restart program was that it was announced without funding, and the funding was not able to be secured. And so it basically.
Another big idea with no money.
Yes.
Let's call it what it is, Adele.
And someone can correct me, but that was my understanding as to why.
But all the expectations were raised and the assumption of tenants was that the building was okay. So it's just big ideas without money are great ideas.
Through you, Chair Emery, I think we can certainly bring back some further information, but I believe that's in principle correct.
Then it was announced without securing the funding. Yes, okay, thank you.
And, but told it was going to happen. Sorry.
Yes, I think it was announced.
It was very much announced, and so there you go. Okay. Sorry, I just had to raise that again. None of us were there.
Brian, I'm not sure if you have your hand up again or if it's just still up from,
Forgot to take it down.
Okay, perfect. Marcel?
Yeah, when it comes to like the demolition and everything, I agree with Councillor Fletcher. I think that the tenants, everyone that lived there should be informed on every part of the process going forward, right? So that they're not, like feeling like they're left out on their own or, abandoned. Because that, you got to remember too, like a lot of the things that they've gone through, they've lost their homes for the most part, right? And there's that abandonment, and like I think it is very important that the support be there for them, and the information that they be provided to them so that they have some kind of comfort knowing where they're, like where everything is going and not being left out in the cold. I think those are the most important things. If you can do that and not forget them, it's good.
It's a really important point. Does anyone want to speak to Marcel's comment?
Through you, Chair, Emery, if I can, Billy, Paula Knight, and the team between Paula, Jessica, and Alan, that is absolutely the intent. And Paula, can you confirm?
Absolutely, through the chair. And actually the comment around some form of closure event has also been discussed. So now that we're at this phase, creating a plan that really is thoroughly about engaging tenants and making sure everything that you said, Director Chabot, is contained within that, because we are very aware of the challenges that this has created for tenants and the emotional impact on them. And we want to be able to be as supportive as we can through this next phase. So that is top of mind.
Uba, sorry, did I see your hand?
Yeah. No, it's just to say I agree with Paula and Marcel, everything that they said. And also some tenants are worried if they move other places when the place is fixed, do they have guarantee that they're gonna return? So it's just that, again, it's that communication piece, just, to assuring them that and communicating with them and making sure that we are meeting their needs, basically.
Through you, Chair Emery, I can confirm that our tenants have the first right of refusal to return to Swansea.
So if there are no other comments, could I have someone move the motion to approve the application for demolition of Swansea Mews as it's included in this report? Marcel? Uba, seconder, thank you very much. All in favor? And good luck, Jessica, with your conversations with the city. So thank you very much. And we will now move on to item 10A, which is the City Council directions requiring board attention. And we have a deputant. I'd like to welcome Kathy Birch back. There's Kathy.
Am I
Thank you.
here? Am I here? Okay, so on page 2 of the report, it's talking about council items requiring board attention. Particularly, I want to speak to MM 2.16 about this tenant advisory committee. I'm here to ask you for help, is what I'm really here to, because as many of you know, I'm out in communities across the portfolio doing accessibility work with the full accessibility team, and we're talking to tenants. And in those conversations, we end up talking about multiple things. Sometimes it's operations, sometimes it can cover the full gambit. I particularly started asking tenants if they understood what this tenant advisory committee was for. And nobody seems to really understand what it's for, because many of us who've been involved with the corporation for a number of years and been tenant voices in various capacities. A lot of times when you get on advisory committees, it will specify what it's for. And I'm going to give you the example of, I was on the advisory committee to create the Commissioner of Housing Equity's office back before it exactly existed. But this one doesn't tell us what it's for. It just says that it's a tenant advisory committee. And so I guess I'm looking for clarity, for you guys to get us clarity as to what this advisory committee's for, and what the criteria to be on it is. Is there going to be an open call? Is it going to be similar to the process that we do for tenant directors? Is this a reincarnation of the tenant side of Tenants First? Because Tenants First right now consists of 2 staff members at City Hall. There's no tenant members on it. They've all been dismissed a long time ago. So, and while I understand they can't be pulled back, and is this recreating this the same thing on to monitor the engagement system? Like, please, we're trying to find out if this is being done to us, with us, what it's about, and we need some clarity. So I'm asking for the board to get some clarity on it and get the information out to us as tenants, because when we read these reports, we're not even sure of what it's about. And while I suspect that it's about the engagement process, because we, for the most part, know that there are some major flaws in it. We also know at the top of that framework of what is the existing engagement system is a citywide group of tenants that kind of come up through the ranks of being a tenant rep and come up to the top of it and not in this current framework. So we don't know how those all compare and how does it all fit in. And so I'm asking you to get us some clarity as tenants, that we want to know if this is being done to us, for us, and what's the criteria for this committee. Please. Thank you.
I'm not sure if it would be helpful for the board if we could actually see the item in 10A that so we can see the language. I don't know if anyone can share that with us. And then my second comment is, would any staff member, Nadia, would you like to speak to Kathy's concerns?
Absolutely. So through you, Chair Emery, thank you for the deputation and the comments, Ms. Birch. Absolutely. I think we can bring a subsequent report to TSC, the Tenant Services Committee, to unpack this a little bit. The original intention of the Tenant Advisory Committee as presented to the Tenant Services Committee was to have, it was an interim committee in lieu of that citywide committee you mentioned, to actually review recommendations and changes to the tenant engagement system. This motion allows us to expand the committee, work with the city to get best practices from the Toronto Seniors Housing Unit, as well as looking at adding additional members to that committee and working with the city to define the terms of reference. So it actually provides us an opportunity to work with the city to further enhance that group and increase credibility and legitimacy. So we're waiting for the formal discussion at council, at committee on this item next week. And ideally we can bring it to the March meeting. I don't know if the reporting timelines will get us there, but I can definitely bring a further update to the TSC committee.
Okay.
Can I ask just one more thing then? Then Nadia, is there
Sure.
any way we can attach that on the tenant advisory committee, that it's about tenant engagement, so that it, in the name of the advisory committee, it actually tells you what the issue is that it's going to be addressing?
So through you, Chair Emery, we can definitely work with the city as the next step, because there'll be an additional outreach process to identify additional members to the committee. So that's something that we can look at to ensure that it's clear to tenants what the committee is and how they can get involved. So definitely something we can look at.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you, Kathy. And
I'll say
could I
something
have a
about that,
motion?
Adele, since it
Oh,
was my
sorry, Paula,
motion.
yes.
One of the goals is to clarify in setting up a whole tenant piece. What is the role of the tenant directors vis-a-vis that piece? Because we have tenant directors anyway. I'm not going to go into it, but this is fairly complicated, and it's got to be resolved in a good way. So I think it'll get there. I'm not sure if everything will be completed by the next board meeting. That's all I'll say.
Okay, so Nadia, I'm presuming that you're handling that and we'll take it through tenant services.
Absolutely, Chair Emery.
Okay. So if there are no other comments, could I ask for a motion to receive item 10A? Nick, thank you. Seconder Brian, all in favor? Perfect. And then I think the last item that we have is item number 11. And I'd like to welcome the Interim Commissioner of Housing Equity. I think John would like to introduce her.
Yes, I would like to do that. And I also, so I would like to recognize two people. One, of course, is the new Interim Director of Housing Equity, Melanie Martin, as well as Ms. Summer, who sat in for, while Melanie was still on maternity leave. Summer Nudell, who sat in, who did a wonderful job, and we're very glad that she has stayed on to assist Melanie in a senior advisor role. So I've met with both of them. They both have made a presentation to the Tenant Services Committee. And when we worked on the OACH plan for 2023, Adele, I was mindful of some of your comments in the past where we weren't really specific enough, and I think they were bang on. There were a lot of generalizations there. And so working with Summer and with Melanie, they put together what I think is a pretty well thought through work plan with actual numbers and targets so that we as a board can make an assessment as to how much work they're doing and how much they're actually getting accomplished. And it's also great for them because they can see it too. And so some benchmarks have been set that I think are going to be helpful for everybody in this process of dealing with, the problem with arrears, which, as I pointed out at the Tenant Services Committee, the vast majority of tenants pay their rent on time, and but there are, as we know, and this is the reason why we have the office, there are people who fall behind and who fall into trouble. And I think right now, they're going to be in very good hands with this new team at OACH. So, Melanie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Director Campbell. I appreciate that. So I can answer questions, or I can just go through the work plan and give a high-level overview to the board if everyone's agreeable to that. It's up to you. I know.
Does anyone have questions for Melanie? Okay. I will say, Melanie, I appreciate that there's more focus on outcomes in this work plan, and I would like to see results when it comes to repayment plans. The success of those plans, if someone's able to, continue on the plan for only 3 months, or if, they're able to sustain the plan that you set up for them. I think that that's also important, but I do appreciate the focus on outcomes. It does make a big difference.
Thank you.
And I'd like to say welcome. It is nice to meet you.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I will say we are going to be conducting those surveys as part of the work plan regarding the repayment plan. So we are going to be trying to track that data. And our hope is by our second biannual report next year, we'll be able to report out to the board on that. So maybe ways we can make sure they're more sustainable and getting feedback from tenants on what can help them ensure their repayment agreement is sustainable long term.
Yeah, I think it gives you information about parameters so that in the future you set up plans that can be sustained. So I think that's wonderful. Does anyone else have any questions for Melanie?
I don't have questions for Melanie. It's just welcome Melanie into the role, and I'm sure we'll be well served. It really does have to do for JAG and back and forth between TCHC staff doing arrears, the solutions team doing arrears, OACH doing arrears, and somehow along the way, I would just like to understand all those functions and systemic change that OACH is actually supposed to bring. And we haven't ever achieved that, in my opinion. Sorry to be so blunt, but we go back and forth with who's doing what, where I do think we need to be very clear what the expectations are on each side of the fence, for the staff side, for the OACH side. So I'm just asking, I'm sure that's going to be something that's in your work plan for the year, and JAG, I'm sure it's in your work plan for the year. Am I right?
Through the chair, I can confirm that yes, both Ms. Martin and I have had discussions, and that is part of what we're intending to outline.
And if we knew the number of staff that are engaged in arrears, that would also be helpful, because we only get one side. So that would be coming from your side, JAG, at some point. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I think that is addressed in the work plan. And, you know, we've heard lots over the years about the OACH approach. And I really do think it's important that TCHC staff that are involved in collecting arrears understand and can implement that OACH approach. And I agree with Paula. It's been a slow adoption within TCHC.
If I could say one thing, Chair Emery, is that we did actually train TCHC staff the first week of February. It was our first training that we've completed. And it actually, the OACH approach is now embedded into the new arrears collection process. So we did train on that. So far, I think we've taken the first step in the right direction. It was our first one. Our second one is scheduled for the beginning of March. And so far, we've gotten really good feedback from the TCHC staff on it. So we're hoping this can support them and we'll see improvement going forward.
And will you be able to quantify that improvement by the less number of cases that are coming to you, Melanie?
I think we're going to have to sit down and determine how we want to measure that. I would think so, because this first training was on this new checklist, and the whole checklist is basically to support our first goal, which is to reduce the number of files coming to OACH. So I think we'll have to measure that and report out on that. Will be the determination of whether it's worked or not, is if we see the less referrals coming to OACH, because more of the cases are being resolved on the front end by TCHC.
So I guess that will be coming to tenant services, Chair Campbell, regularly. That information, so we're able to oversee that. Thank you.
And my understanding is that checklist has been simplified, because that was one of the issues in the past.
So what the checklist, sorry, through the chair, is that it's actually become more of a screening tool for both of us. So for both TCHC and OACH. So now before OACH will actually accept a referral, we're actually screening to ensure that TCHC has followed the steps of the arrears collection process. Have they tried to resolve the arrears before it's coming to OACH? Those are the kind of things we're looking for through that checklist. And if they haven't been completed, we'll actually be sending it back and providing guidance and asking them to do that work before a referral is made to OACH, with the hope that it'll be resolved prior, not needing to come to us.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Melanie? Okay, hearing none, could I have a motion to receive? Oh, I guess it's approval. Sorry. Approval of the work plan and the performance appraisal. John, could I have a seconder? Marcel, thank you. All in favor? And thank you very much, Melanie, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future. So I think that is the last item. And thank you very much for your time today. And I'd like to have a motion to terminate the public session of the TCHC board. Brian, thank you. And Debbie, seconder, thank you. All in favor?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.